Burton, for instance, they were the individuals who posed that question to us. Kawartha Lakes, we were asked, and what are conditions that are important for innovation, for startups? Northumberland, how can we attract knowledge-based industry? And in Haliburton, how do we retain youth and non-retirees? We also want, of course, to ensure that retirees are engaged in creative industry. Other questions in Eastern Ontario include culture-related questions. What are best practices in cultural community planning? This creative economy is all based on culture, and it's often based on culture. So how do we actually, in a very conscious way, use the culture of our community to foster new business and increase the vibrancy of our region? How do we promote creativity and innovation? What are some of the emerging industries that we should be investing in? You know, like the green industry, should we be tapping into this creatively? What about IT and technology developments? And again, back to this whole issue of strategic planning. How do we actually not just have this bubble up, which is good, bottom-up activity is good, but how do we do some top-down strategic planning? And how do we very proactively benefit from opportunities such as expanding information society and technology-related employment? If we go and look at Southwestern Ontario, the questions that they were raising and asking us to address were related to methodological issues, for instance. You know, to what extent can traditional economic development practice simply be applied here, or is there something very fundamentally different? You know, do you need a different development methodology? How can we capitalize on culture once again? And I have to defer to Craig Desjardins. How can we convince municipal leaders to invest in cultural planning? And again, attraction of creative workers and retention of the creative class in rural and smaller communities. Southwestern Ontario focused explicitly on employment and training issues, such as, you know, let's think long term. What are the next generation jobs? What are the jobs that we should be targeting? How should schools and educational institutions be changing their programming so that we can be equipped for these jobs? So what are the employment trends? And where are we going to get these people anyway? With respect to emerging economies, again, there are some transitional issues. How do we work with communities that want to take advantage of this? Then what is the transition? What are the skills that they most need? Moving from an old, quote-unquote, to a new knowledge-based creative economy focus. I just wanted to say before I pass the slides and this particular presentation over to my colleague Betsy Donald, that we've done some research to respond to some of these requests for information already. On our website is a report that Dr. Donald herself created. I believe it may also be available on the Martin Prosperity Institute website because we're partnering with them in a number of initiatives, and we're pleased to share research and findings. This is growing the rural creative economy. In this case, it was specifically in Prince Edward County. Jeff Dixon and I were privileged, along with Craig Desjardins and Dr. Donald, to participate in a Financial Post, very exciting, very innovative forum where we logged on online and just fielded questions from all over Canada and beyond on the creative economy. We talked about what factors would lead to investment in the creative economy in rural regions. And, you know, one of the key takeaways is infrastructure is critical. You've got to have that if you want these smaller communities to function like the larger metropolitan areas. And of course, finally, we have the seminar series, which we're finishing today. And we've put it forward as a way of responding to some of these questions that are being raised and providing value and answers. So, as you know, we've dealt with the definitional issues, facts and fiction, some of the challenges of the theory and the practice. We've looked at best practice in Prince Edward County. We've, in our last session, looked at policy, and today we're focused on research. So, with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Betsy.
Thank you very much, Yolande. And I just wanted to acknowledge Dr. Chan for her incredible professionalism and brilliance really in pulling this series together, and just her general support of colleagues across the university and partners in the community as well as graduate students. It's just a pleasure to work with her, and anyone who wants to have a good experience, I suggest you hook up with the Monessen Center. So thank you for all your support. I was asked by Dr. Chan to just come back and sort of think a little bit about what are some of the future directions of the rural creative economy. And for those of you who weren't at my introductory comments that I did on the first session, which was called Creative Economy, Fact and Fiction, I think you can look at that presentation. But one of the things I wanted to emphasize in that was that some people get caught up in the word creative as if it's somehow proprietary to, Richard Florida or something. But I think it's important to realize that creative economy is part of this long intellectual tradition in regional economic development that has spent years and years, and there's many of us, Kevin and I and hundreds of colleagues across the world, who are constantly thinking about why some regions grow and others do not, even when they're in the same jurisdiction, or so why are some regions, even with the same money, with the same talent, with the same firms, able to grow and others are not? And I think that issue is becoming more and more important as we see globally countries around the world, falling into disarray with this global recession, regions, municipalities going bankrupt in the same nation state. So it really raises questions. I think it's even more important than ever to be thinking about why do some regions have the capacity to grow and even flourish where others are going into decline or are sort of holding steady. So I think that question is even more important now. So I kind of like to call it the opportunity economy, and I always start from the fundamental proposition point that you're attracted to a place, or you live in a place because of a job, because you have an opportunity for your family, your community. You can have the kind of lifestyle that you want. You're looking for balance. It always sort of comes down to those factors. And one of the Merritt Gertler, Professor Gertler at the University of Toronto, he's actually the Dean of Arts and Science now, but he did a really excellent presentation at a conference I was at the beginning of May, and it was on the social dynamics of talent, attraction, and retention. And what he did was he summarized this research project that I've been involved in and Kevin's been involved in, where we looked at the talent, attraction, and retention issues of 22 communities across Canada. And he summarized all the data. There were over 600 interviews. There were a lot of statistical work that was done as well. And the takeaway point from his presentation, which I thought was a very balanced, excellent presentation, where he basically said there are many different lifestyle choices. I know there's this tendency to think everybody wants to live in the city, but ultimately everybody's choosing a different kind of path, and that it depends on your life cycle, it depends on a whole lot of factors. And it's a really nice presentation to look at because I think it really speaks to the importance of the rural quality of life, and that is a very desirable option for a lot of talent in Canada. So
235.
That was I thought was something just to focus on. So I'm of course asked to think about future research, and I'm always thinking about what are some of the big questions of the moment. And I guess right now, many of us in this area of research are thinking about what are some of the new metrics for creative rural potential. And I've argued in a paper that I published with my doctoral student, Nathaniel Lewis, that was published in Urban Studies in January of this year, that we really need to think about a new rubric for creative city potential in smaller cities. And this could apply, I think, to smaller towns and cities, where we can focus on indicators like livability and sustainability. And what we actually did was we took a lot of the more traditional indicators that have been used, and we started to look at issues of affordability, of quality of life around ecological footprint, the extent to which there's a green trend in a community. And from that work, I'm quite interested now in looking at other variables, such as at the firm level. I'm very interested still